is to Mr. Faisal Khan. The question says, which food safety and quality systems are being applied in Safa currently?
Thank you very much. We are having basically a HACCP-based ISO 22000 in our plant, and we got the certification from SGS. This is agency, Swiss agency, which has certified us actually, and we have obtained this certification for the second time. So almost 6 years running, Alhamdulillah, we are actually having this certification.
And also the second part of this question is, how are you measuring the effectiveness of these systems?
Yeah, this is very important actually. We are having periodic inspections, the third-party audits, there are internal audits. We are having internal audits. So these different audits are conducted on a neutral basis, on a neutral ground. We are having inspection agencies coming from outside. The internal auditors are also looking into the compliance level as for the compliance with the established manual and the documents. So thorough audits and inspections take place periodically, which actually make sure like our system is on track. And if we find any deviations or somewhere we are having some lacuna, definitely we are improving upon it. And as I said, every day is a new day for us, and we believe in continuous improvement, what they call it N+1. So the philosophy of N+1, we need to move on towards the improvement every time. We believe we are not perfect, but we are moving in a better direction. That's the whole result. Nobody is perfect in the world. What we need to do is move towards the betterment step by step. This is the company philosophy.
That's true. Thank you so much for answering that question. Mr. Mitchell, from, I guess, food safety point of view, since you mentioned a very interesting psychological effect of, groups on individual, the question says, how can power and authority change or influence the culture and behavior of individuals? And I'm assuming this is from, again, a food safety point of view.
Again, very good question. I think when you implement any management system, it always has to start at the top. Management, commitment, leadership is definitely the number one. And I think for really influencing the food safety culture, the management need to be seen to be doing it themselves. I give an example from my previous company, Almarai. When I really knew that we had implemented food safety culture properly, when I had the general manager of the operations division on his hands and knees, looking underneath a filling machine, looking for mold. And, when people see that type of commitment right from the top, that's when people start to sit up and take notice and do it themselves.
Thank you for answering that question. Mr. Springer, question says, how can we apply HACCP correctly for food safety from your own point of view?
It depends on the industry in the first thing. The point I was making in the presentation was there's a significant difference between applying HACCP to manufacturing than there is in catering. Manufacturing is science-based, effectively, with lots of people that are very knowledgeable about food safety in all areas, generally speaking, especially the larger factories. You don't have that in catering. So my main plea is to consider the resources and the knowledge and the competence within the operation, and don't try and impose something that you don't understand or is too complex. So you can't or you shouldn't bring in a consultant and have no involvement whatsoever. The HACCPs, the food safety management system, has got to be essentially designed and operated by the individuals. by the business concerned. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what system you have. It's not about pedantics, it's not about theory, it's about, does it produce safe food? And if it works for you and the enforcement and the auditors are happy, then go with it. But if, on the other hand, if you're a catering organisation and you want to put in ISO 22000 or any of the other systems, if you believe that system works for you and you've got the expertise to implement it effectively, then go for that. But at the end of the day, it's, does it work within the resources that you've got?
Thank you so much, Mr. Springer. Dr. Nemir, I have a few questions for you. For starters, which strains of Salmonella did you test when using the radio frequency treatment? And were there any effects on the quality of the eggs?
Sure. The strains of Salmonella was Enterica. I don't remember the culture number. It was one of the ATCC strains deposited. We always use outbreak strains. Some laboratories are limited to using surrogates or non-pathogenic strains. Our laboratories are set up to actually work with human pathogens. So when we do this work, we use strains that have been isolated from outbreaks because we want them to be as relevant as possible. From a quality standpoint, that's actually one of the advantages of this technology is that when we did the testing on these eggs, looking for yolk curvature, for water retention, for protein coagulation for the eggs, we saw very, very little change at these very effective treatment levels. Some of the testing that we did was entirely mechanical, looking at performance characteristics of the eggs from an instrumentation standpoint. But we also have taken these eggs and put them through baking trials, where we made angel food cakes, which are based on fluffed egg whites. And the angel food cakes that we made using these salmonella-free eggs that have been treated with radio frequency were, essentially indistinguishable from ones that were made with raw, untreated eggs, and actually perform much better than ones that were treated with a thermal process. Purely from an instrumentation standpoint, they have very good quality, and then we actually use them through these functional trials for baked good products using these. They look pretty good. We have plans on the books now for further expansion for other kinds of raw egg applications, sauces, salad dressings, and other things that would need that kind of raw egg functionality to assure the quality that we're going forward with these treated eggs.
Thank you. Another question addressed to you, Dr. Nemira. So you've explained the new and creative processing methods to have better results in the removal of pathogens from food. Well, what about the overall nutritional value of foods exposed to these types of processes? Does it change or?
Sure. That's an excellent question. Anytime we develop one of these technologies, we always want to be mindful of the impact on quality, nutritional value, wholesomeness, and functionality. Our whole mindset is that it doesn't really matter if we've developed a technology that kills the salmonella if it also ruins the food. Okay, we don't want to turn out something that's bland, tasteless, has no nutritional value. So we actually have a staff of quality and analysts on, in our facility that look at these very questions. Look at vitamin content, performance in the foods, color, texture, aroma, and so on. Any of these technologies, will give you good results, and you'll get good reduction. I think, like anything, you can sort of turn the dial up too high and force some damage on the food. But it's always a sweet spot in terms of how much inactivation of the pathogens you can get, what kind of food safety targets you can achieve while still maintaining that quality. And so sometimes it's a little bit of a tension between our microbiologists and our food technologists. We want to turn it up high, and the quality people say, no, that's too much. So that's where we develop the optimized treatments for shorter pulse times or for lower temperatures or for other things so that we can get those food safety targets that we want while still maintaining the color, texture, taste, nutritional value, performance functionality that we need to have a real technology that can actually be used in the real world. If it can't be used in the real world by real companies actually trying to make food for people, then it's kind of unlimited value.
Yeah, I see. Regarding the last point you made, I just received a new question. It's they're asking, could these methods potentially affect the actual product's makeup and then in turn affect the end user? So, as you said, you have your own quality team, but is it possible for these methods to still affect the food regardless?
Well, again, it's possible that you could start to have some of these things, but there's a whole system in place to catch that before it reaches anybody, before it's actually used. Anything that we do, we're a team of scientists. We don't actually make, and we don't actually sell eggs to the public. We don't make angel food cakes or anything. We always partner with companies and with industry. So any technology that we're going to be using has to be approved by our regulatory agencies, by our FDA. That's the point at which they would say, before we're going to allow you to use radio frequency treatment to make salmonella-free eggs or cold plasma to make, listeria-free apples, they're going to ask the questions about toxicology, about chemical residues, about anything else. And then there will have to be a full certification process, which part of which we do in-house as we're developing the technologies, part of which the company does to ensure that there's no unwanted, say, migration from packaging, by short chain oligomers or chemical residues or other things like that, to make sure that there aren't any unwanted consequences or unknown sort of side effects of these processes, so that the food that the consumer is getting, whether it's been treated with radio frequency or chlorine dioxide or cold plasma or whatever it is as high quality as they need it to be, as they expect it to be. So you're not going to have any surprises or any unwanted side effects.
Thank you so much. Mr. Faisal, from your own point of view, can you tell us what is the best manufacturing practices to use in Oman, like very locally here, I guess, depending on our own like environmental factors and stuff like that?
Basically, as I said, we need to start with always a very simple approach. It need not to be very sophisticated to start with. If we start with a sophisticated method, normally it tends to fail, in compliance. So in Oman, like say for example, we are talking about a very small, enterprise or SME kind of thing, or a small restaurant or a catering firm. So they need to have basic PRP in place. First of all, PRP plays a very important role. You need to have PRP, the facility devised in such a manner like it facilitate the right cleaning and sanitation program. If you don't have that PRP in place, then you will encounter a lot of problems. So to have a right PRP program in place, the first thing, and second, to apply the good manufacturing practices. And step by step, you can move towards HACCP, then you can move towards the ISO 9000, ISO 22000, and then the furthermore step will be the total quality management. But to start, you should have a right prerequisite program in place. That is very vital.
Thank you so much. Allow me to just take one last question. This is directed to both Mr. Richard and Mr. Campbell. How much would you say, how important is the pest control for food safety in general?
You go first, Richard.
I'm not sure in terms of food poisoning as to how many times pests are actually implicated in food poisoning. I don't think they're anywhere near the top of the list. However, in terms of prosecutions and closure, in certainly most countries that I've worked in, pests, and particularly rodents, cockroaches, are going to be top of the list for causing businesses to close, etc. And I think that you need to obviously have effective pest management in place. And the other thing, which I think Campbell will elaborate on, if you're going to go into a premises and measure something like food safety culture, then If there's a raging pest infestation that's not being acted on, you can forget measuring food safety culture, because there's no food safety in the business. And if you can't have a food safety culture without food safety, and therefore the first indication you can go into a business and look at the basics, look at the cleanliness, which is just as important, look at the pests, look at the personal hygiene. And if those are wrong, then to my way of thinking, it's not cost effective to start measuring food safety culture, because you've got to get those things right. Once you get those things right, and then you put in your management systems and so on, then you can start effectively measuring your food safety culture and looking for basically the icing on the cake. Okay, Campbell.
Couldn't agree more, Richard. Yeah, like pest control, we prefer to call it integrated pest management these days rather than pest control. And yeah, it's fundamental to food safety. And best practices, it's a partnership between you and your service provider. And the role of the service provider should be to give you advice on how to prevent issues from occurring, rather than wait until you have a problem and then you treat the problem with chemicals. So that's always been my philosophy with pest management.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Richard and also Mr. Campbell. I think we can just wrap up now. So I would just like to thank you all for joining us today, and thank the audience for also tuning in. We will be back again tomorrow for day 2, starting at 10 a.m. So please join us once again. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Laura.